Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. I want to focus at the outset on foreign policy. I want to talk for a few minutes about Ukraine, and I want to talk about the fact that the Russians at this moment are attacking Odessa. That's right, Odessa. Vladimir Putin has not relented, has not stepped back. He is determined to pursue his war. Interestingly enough, it's not on the front pages of American newspapers, but it should be, because what is happening now in Ukraine is a slaughter. It's a slaughter, by the way, on both sides. Not only are Ukrainians dying in massive numbers, but Russian soldiers are also being sacrificed for the sake of Vladimir Putin's war on Ukraine. What it means, my friends, is the impotence of the world, the impotence of the West is clear. I'm just reading a book about appeasement. Appeasing Hitler is the title of the book. It is a fascinating volume because it goes to show you that in the end, the only thing that stopped Hitler was the determination of the West. There is a difference, of course, a difference which I've emphasized in the past, but which I want to emphasize again. And that is that nuclear weapons now play a role. We have talked about the fact that in 1975, an agreement was reached dealing with the whole question of relations between the United States and the then Soviet Union. Détente was in the air, and although there were critics of détente, including Ronald Reagan, who ultimately embraced détente, the simple truth is that the de-escalation of tensions helped to end the Cold War. And then came 1995, an agreement signed by the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and the then President of Russia. It was an agreement dealing with Ukraine. Ukraine would give up, based on the Budapest Agreement, which you can Google, would give up the third most powerful nuclear arsenal in the world in order to receive from the United States, Great Britain, and indeed Russia itself, assurances that by giving up those nuclear weapons, there would be security guaranteed to Ukraine. That didn't just include Kiev, it included Odessa. It included the whole Ukraine area. And of course, the agreement failed. It failed in large measure because of one man, Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin has stated repeatedly his determination to take Ukraine back. Remember, when I visited Ukraine back in 1969, it was part of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. And indeed, what happened in those days was that the Soviet Union kept a tight fist on Ukrainian nationalism. I will never forget meeting a professor at Colorado College who was of Ukrainian origin, and he taught a course on Ukrainian nationalism. And he said to me, and I've never forgotten it, if ever the heavy foot of Russia is lifted from the neck of Ukraine, we will restore our nation, our language, our culture. And let me assure you, those were prophetic words. But now we live in a different world. We live in a world in which, if in fact Europe, that is, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, along with the United States and the Western allies, tried to liberate Ukraine from this Russian aggression, we could face a nuclear conflagration. And that, my friends, is the reason why, with all the rhetoric, there is no reality. I search in vain for the headlines about the suffering of the people of Ukraine. I search in vain for statements by Donald Trump that really go after Vladimir Putin. Indeed, I remember vividly earlier this last year when Donald Trump suggested that it was Ukraine itself that was responsible for the war. Why am I raising this with you today? Because when you see mass attacks, starvation, winter attempts to shut down the power plants, what does it mean? Russia is waging an all-out war against Ukraine. And we need to be aware of it. People are dying. And frankly, there seems to be little we can do about it. But the world must notice. We must report on a daily basis the atrocities taking place in Ukraine by Russia. And indeed, the Russians are feeling it too. Several of their leading generals have been assassinated in Russia itself. The Ukrainians, with the limited means that they have, are striking back. But it's not enough. I wanted this morning to raise this issue with you. I wanted to raise it because of my deep, deep distress over the appeasement of Putin. That's right. Because we cannot confront him directly, because of the nuclear threat, we are doing everything we can to appease him. This is not good, and it does not augur well for the West, or for Europe, or for Ukraine itself. I wish this morning that I had an answer. Perhaps if the world acted in a united fashion and had a total boycott of Russian goods, maybe that would make a difference. But the world is not prepared to do that, and so the carnage continues. And the statement by Donald Trump prior to his election as president, that if he were in the White House, he would end the war within 24 hours, clearly not true. I raise this with you this morning respectfully, but I want you all to do me a favor. When during the day you look for news, just Google the war in Ukraine and see the latest atrocity committed by the Russians. And understand, Ukraine is desperate. Well, we shall see. The other big foreign story is a trip by Isaac Herzog, the president of Israel, to Australia. Now, you might wonder why it is such a significant story. And the reason is because President Herzog is being met with massive demonstrations opposing any presence by Israel in Australia. This, a far cry from the days when Australia was viewed as one of the best friends of Israel. This, my friends, is a worldwide trend to create a situation in which Israel is expelled, if you will, from the civilized world. This idea of pronouncing a black ball, if you will, against Israel has become current. I'm raising it with you now because, again, it's not in the headlines, but it ought to be. We ought to be aware of what has happened. When it comes to foreign policy, remember that a president is king, and you will note there is a new bridge which has been developed from the United States to Canada. And Donald Trump, using the power of the presidency, has said, we will not open that bridge until Canada conforms to what we want. I want you again to understand a subject which I have discussed with you in the past, and which I do so again with no reluctance at all, that Donald Trump seems, because of his power as president, to intend to use it in a vindictive way against Canada. Let me be clear. Canada has been one of the best friends the United States has ever had. It has stood with us through thick and thin. And what is Donald Trump's concern? It is that Canada acts independently economically, that it will, now that Donald Trump has severed many trade ties with Canada, opening the doors to China and Russia. Where for every action, there is a reaction. And let me be very clear that Donald Trump should not be surprised. And we in the United States should not be surprised. Of course, Russia is of deep concern what they're doing in Ukraine. Of course, we need to understand that what is happening in the relation to Israel in Australia, deep concern. But this question of Canada, America's neighbor, its partner, well, this is again the power of the president, which needs to be looked at carefully. I want to say a quick word about our domestic concerns. The story in this morning's San Francisco Chronicle by Laura Waxman is astounding. The Trump administration has given the San Francisco Housing Authority 30 days to verify the citizenship status of an unspecified number of tenants. By the way, this is not just in San Francisco. It just happens I'm reading the story from the San Francisco Chronicle. It is extending across the nation. The order comes now from HUD Secretary Scott Turner, announcing an effort to ensure that federal housing assistance would no longer be granted to ineligible residents of sanctuary cities by eliminating any ambiguity in policy. The Trump administration is raising many questions about immigration, many questions about citizenship. They're even going so far as to want right to birthright citizenship to be challenged, and the Supreme Court will rule on that shortly. But I want to point out how significant this is. After all, the United States of America is the land of the free. It is the land which has been the place where people have come seeking sanctuary and support for years. Give us your tired, your poor, your hungry masses yearning to breathe free. Those words by Emma Lazarus adorn the plaque at the Statue of Liberty. Donald Trump has changed the way we work, has changed our policies, and we need to be aware again of the power of a president when it comes to foreign policy. Venezuela is no longer on the leading light agenda of most journalists. But remember, what we have done in Venezuela is equally important, and our threats to Colombia are really real. And all of this, my friends, all of it comes back to one individual, the President of the United States. Next Monday, we will mark something called President's Day. Once upon a time, we celebrated Washington and Lincoln, but now it's a 3-day holiday weekend. And so we celebrate presidents. Personally, I celebrate Warren Harding. I say that for those of you who listened to me on KGO, who understood my deep affection for Warren Harding, who died here in San Francisco. But the simple truth is, one of the things that President's Day should afford us is the opportunity to understand the power of the president in foreign policy and, yes, in domestic policy. These actions by the Trump administration that affect us in terms of our foreign relations, but also affect us in terms of internal relations, these are things we should be thinking about. And on Around the Political World with John Rothman, I try to raise these questions. And I hope you're listening. I want to close this particular podcast by pointing out that because of the actions of the United States, people are suffering. It might also be said because of the inaction of the United States, people are suffering. But no matter where you look in the world, it is very clear that the role of the United States of America is central, that we must be the ones who guard freedom, and we must be viewed by the world as exemplars of freedom. I regret to say that during the Trump administration, this has not been the case. Bluff and bluster can only go so far. It is time for the president and his administration to rethink some of their actions in foreign policy. I know this is a different approach today in terms of foreign policy, but I wanted to show the connection between what we do abroad and what we do at home. This is the United States of America. It's not Germany in the 1930s. Verifying proof of citizenship or discriminating against people who are here in the United States, well, that bothers me, and it should bother each and every one of you. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. You can write a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, and click any of the links to the show notes to connect with me on social media, particularly when it comes to question and answers on Friday. I hope there will be foreign policy questions. Remember, please, to share this episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which is, of course, our goal. The show has been getting such positive attention that we're excited to bring on our advertising support. Hopefully, more will emerge. I want to say a special thank you to the wonderful producer of Around the Political World with John Rothman, Gogo Zoger. I do so every single day because it is Gogo and her efforts which make sure that this program can be heard. I am John Rothman. I will be back tomorrow with another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. See you then.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.